Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this event to you today. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker question that you'll see pop up in your chat. All right, so that question's in your chat now. Our icebreaker today is where are you joining from and what's one hopeful sign of the clean energy transition you've noticed in your daily life? If you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other today. We will be recording this event and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out the recording after this event. I'm very grateful that everyone is here today because even though the news has been challenging to read for a lot of reasons lately, there really is still hopeful information about the climate. We just don't hear enough about it. So thank you for joining us today to get your September monthly dose of climate hope. Let's check out some of the answers that we have in our chat. We've got Pat coming in from from New Jersey. Awesome. Recently hosted a community solar array. Love to hear that. Debbie from Illinois also loves her solar panels. Sacramento, more battery storage. Beaverton, Oregon from Elizabeth. That's close to where I am too. Thank you everyone who's been answering that icebreaker so far. And please feel free to keep answering that as we get started today. Before we transition into our live interview with Jigar, we're going to warm up by taking an action together, inspired by Jigar's work. If this is your first time hearing about Climate Action Now, our app and website make it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and business leaders. You'll be able to take action using the app or the website today. One added benefit of using the app is that you can earn points by taking action, and when you earn enough points, our reforestation partner in Kenya will plant a real tree on your behalf. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the Climate Action Now app, I'll share my screen for just a moment. Alrighty, you should be seeing that screen now. So this is an example action like the one that you'll see today. It only takes 3 touches to take an action. First, you touch Do It Now. Then you can choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to. Because the app has your address, it automatically knows who your federal, state, and sometimes even local officials are. Then you just have to hit send, and you've already taken an action. As you take action, you're going to earn points. When you earn enough points, we plant a real tree on your behalf. And so far, we've planted over 400,000 trees together.
And that's with an extremely well-resourced and reputable organization in Kenya, led by Victor Mwanga, the Earth Lungs Foundation. I have an in-depth interview with him available on our Substack.
Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out that interview with Sam and Victor. So now that we've seen a sample action, that brings us to the action that we'll be taking together today. So we'll be urging our federal representatives to defend market-preferred clean energy. So go ahead and take out your phones or tablets and open up your camera app. If you have or want to use the Climate Action Now app, feel free to use the QR code on the left. As you're pointing your camera at the QR code, a little pop-up that says Climate Action Now should appear. Once it does, just tap on that to get to today's action. If you don't have the app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the App Store where you can download it for free. Once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and then it will take you right to today's action. If you're not on the app or you prefer taking action on a web form, feel free to scan the QR code on the right instead. And if that's not working for you, don't worry. I'll also drop some links into the chat to help you take that action directly. I'll be stopping to share my screen, but in a few moments, I'm going to turn my camera into an action slide to make sure you still have access. Now, to turn to our live interview for today. Sam Matey, the editor-in-chief at Climate Action Now, will be talking with our truly incredible guest speaker, Jigar Shah. Our team is so insanely excited to bring you this conversation today. Sam authors the Dose of Climate Hope Substack newsletter from Climate Action Now. Dose of Climate Hope illustrates new technologies, policy solutions, people, and trends that give us reason to be hopeful about the climate. Jigar Shah is a clean energy entrepreneur, investor, and policy leader with over 25 years of experience advancing sustainable infrastructure. Most recently, he revitalized the U.S. Department of Energy's Loan Program Office, catalyzing billions in clean energy investment. He's currently a co-host of the Open Circuit podcast and a senior fellow at World Resources Institute. He founded Sun Edison, co-founded Generate Capital, and served as the first CEO of the Carbon War Room. Jigar is also the author of Creating Climate Wealth and was named to Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2024. We'll now transition into our live interview. As you hear from Jigar and Sam, please share any questions you'd like to contribute to the discussion in the chat. Over to you, Sam.
Hi, so I have been researching and writing about the incredibly cool stuff Jigar Shah has been doing for years, and I am really excited to finally get to talk with him face to face today. This guy is an absolute superstar of the clean energy revolution and was maybe the single most important person in the Biden administration's climate team, at least in terms of raw decarbonization metrics. Not trying to pit people against each other, just the Loan Programs Office. The Green New Deal was a political slogan in the 2010s that didn't, and a bill with that title didn't pass in 2019. But the amount of funding under the Inflation Reduction Act, at least while that funding was congressionally mandated, since between its passing in 2025 and its absolutely tragic partial repeal between its passing in 2022 and its absolutely tragic partial repeal earlier this year, in those 3 years, Jigar Shah oversaw what was essentially a Green New Deal, hundreds of billions of dollars of funding supporting a wide range of fascinating clean energy projects across the nation dispersed through the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office. So he is an absolutely central figure in the American clean energy ecosystem. And even since the really upsetting, deeply disruptive setbacks that we've seen this year, he's still been a voice of optimism, focusing on the fundamental value proposition of clean energy, the learning curves and the regulatory barriers to getting this already market preferred, already sort of dominant energy, no longer alternative energy, to be to to provide the clean power that we know it can provide. And he's been rallying the sort of renewable energy field more broadly to think of themselves as a unit, as a political force in a fight, because the only real barriers left are political. And the fossil fuel industry has done a great job at acting as a political force and getting wildly unfair restrictions on renewable energy. So, Jiggle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, my first question is, what is your sort of overall picture on the state of the United States in the global electrification surge? Because we're obviously seeing unbelievably amazing electrification numbers worldwide, but a lot of that's coming out of a lot of that's coming out of sort of China's electrotech colossus. And the United States lately has seen some very high profile, very upsetting attacks on clean energy from the president, from the White House, that are discouraging investors, discouraging international relationships, and are just generally really, really counterproductive and upsetting. Not just the congressional repeal of tax credits, but actual executive orders to cancel clean energy projects, like an illegal shutdown of the Greenbelt Express power transmission line, the probably illegal stop work order on a nearly complete offshore wind farm, and of course, deporting actual battery engineers from an under construction battery plant in Georgia, which is just beyond insane. So given all these horrible things, what's sort of your positive case? I've read some of it. What's your case that not all is lost in the US, and what is your sort of overall view of the state of play in sort of clean energy in the United States at this time?
Yeah, look, it's great to be here, and thanks for the great question. Look, I think that it's very easy to get whipsawed around where we are on the deployment of clean energy when you're getting all of information from Twitter or Blue Sky or hopefully not True Social, but other sort of social media platforms. And so we're in this place right now where people don't really understand facts from fiction, and so we're just sort of churning, right? I think it's important to recognize that when you think about energy sources, right? We have lots of energy sources. We have oil, we have gas, we have electricity, right? Electricity only surpassed oil and gas as the number one largest source of energy globally in 2007, and it has never looked back, right? So every year, electricity keeps growing and growing and growing, and oil and gas keeps becoming a smaller and smaller percentage of the overall energy that we use in the world, right? So this whole notion of electrifying is happening, right? So let's not create a whole different type of fact base, right? Like it's happening. And, we talk about electric vehicles. We obviously talk about, induction stoves and things like that. But when you think about just basic things like motors, right, and things like that, we are electrifying lots of things in our industrial sector and other places, right? And so that is happening at scale, right? Now, when you think about renewable energy, right? When you look at the state of California, or you look at like the Western Power Pool, you look at Texas, the cost of generation has stayed flat since 2010. So as we've grown more and more solar, wind, other, clean technologies, our cost of generation had stayed flat, right? In Texas, 2 or 3 years ago, we had $1,000 per megawatt hour spikes when there was a natural gas plant that went unexpectedly offline, right? That no longer happens because we have so many batteries deployed in Texas, right? And so all the volatility is gone out of that market. And you're starting to see that happen in European markets and other places. And so all of the technologies that we worked for 40, 50 years to commercialize are now the most cost-effective way of solving these problems, right? So I think we want to recognize all the progress that we've made. And when you look at where China is in terms of its deployment of clean energy, they're just behind our deployment as a percentage of the grid, right? They're at about 35% of their grid being clean energy, and we're about 45% of the grid being clean energy, right? And so I just want to make sure we're crystal clear about how much progress we made. I get the fact that China hasn't heard of energy efficiency, and so they should probably figure out how to do that soon. But we've actually become really quite efficient at the way in we use electricity, and so our GDP numbers are just far higher per kilowatt hour of electricity that we use versus China. I think that the next stage of this is now about affordability, right? When Trump came into office in 2017, our technologies were really scaling fast, but they weren't really the most affordable solutions available. Today, they are clearly the most affordable solutions available. And I think one of the challenges that we have in this moment is that all of these extraordinary people on this call, but others around the country who are willing to put their time and effort into things, I think are largely focused on, national politics. And where the battle is at the states, right? So when you think about why your electricity costs are going up 10% a year, it's because we've invented all of this stuff that people are not allowing you to deploy at scale at the local level. And that is your governor's fault. It is not President Trump's fault, right? Like when you think about the state of Maryland, where I live, the state of Maryland has had the highest rate increases in the last 4 years. Why? Because the governor is asleep, right? And he's a Democrat, right? And so when you think about like, I have a battery in my house, am I allowed to use that battery to help my neighbor stabilize his electricity bill? No, right? I have an electric vehicle. Am I allowed to use my electric vehicle to stabilize my neighbor's costs? That program only started last week, right? And so we're starting to see that instead of increasing the amount of capacity of transmission and distribution in this country, we need to use what we've already paid for more efficiently. And guess what? All of those technologies come out of the clean energy space, right? And so we need to be smarter about how we actually manage load growth in this moment, because load growth can actually reduce everybody's electricity bills. But right now, we're doing it the wrong way because we're not deploying clean energy technologies. And so I'm super excited about where we are, but I think it's important for us to recognize that that this is a very confusing time for a lot of people. And the clarity that comes out of your organization is what we need right now to really educate our local elected officials, really educate the federal government, and then increasingly governments around the world.
Yeah, and that is what we're trying to do. We're really trying to focus. Like I write daily dose actions about clean energy, and I'm really trying to follow the lead that you've been promoting, which is don't even talk about don't even talk about the fact that this reduces emissions. That's not the focus. Focus on this is cheaper energy that your government is keeping from you. Make electricity cheap again. Like focus on cost of living, affordability, because now we can actually the climate movement's not used to talking about that because for decades we were like, okay, this is more expensive technology, this is new, but if we invest in research and development, we can really build this up into an alternative energy that can replace what we have. And now it's like, okay, this is the cheapest energy in the world. This is more than 93% of what's being built in America this year. This is more than 90% of what's being built worldwide. This is overwhelmingly what the market wants to build. And the barriers now are political barriers to not letting us build it. So access this cheap energy that will make your life better. That is absolutely the message we're trying to send.
No, I think that's exactly right. But I mean, like just to give you a practical example, if you want to put solar panels on your roof and battery storage in your garage, the cheapest place to do that right now is in Texas.
Yeah.
It's half the cost in Texas than it cost me in Maryland. Why?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, right? If you decide to buy a solar system and a battery system in Texas, you can get it installed from the person coming to your house to sell it to you to installing it, it's a week.
Yeah. And in
In
Australia, faster. They have same day permitting in
It's same
Australia.
day, right? Here in
Yeah.
Maryland, it's 6 months, right?
Permitting
And
is a
so
massive bottleneck.
it's a huge bottleneck. And so part of what I want people to do is to get out of the politics of the moment and start getting to a checklist, right? As you suggested, we have technologies that are ready to scale, right? What we don't have is a permission structure to actually use these solutions at scale to solve our current problem, right? And I think that's what we need to do. Like if you ask people like how does load growth reduce costs? I think most people think load growth is a bad thing, right? But load growth mostly is not coming from AI data centers. Load growth is mostly coming from people putting in electric vehicles, heat pumps, new manufacturing facilities, economic growth, right? And so what happens is when you have to spend money on the transmission system and the distribution system, which in this country is old, and so a lot of it just is old and needs to be replaced, but your denominator, the kilowatt hours you sell, are not going up, well, then by definition, the cost per unit goes up, right? So load growth is fine. But we have our transmission system is only used 55% of the time, and our distribution system is used less than 20% of the time, right? So it's sized so that if you plug in everything at the same time, right, that the grid will continue to work, right? But if I put in rooftop solar and a battery, that means that whatever it is, 100 hours a year, that my distribution grid is at peak, right? Meaning everyone's plugged in their electric vehicle and their heat pumps are going strong, right? We need to be able to dispatch my battery to be able to avoid any like congestion on that distribution circuit. That is way cheaper than spending $100 million to upgrade that distribution circuit, right?
Exactly. Because this whole prosumer model that you've been such a herald of, that this has been has just absolutely changes how we think about energy. Because like Saul Griffith, who I talked with a couple weeks ago, was saying
Yeah,
in Australia, if magic infinite clean energy from like the Tesseract from the Avengers appeared in Australia at some grid substation, it would still not be cheaper than rooftop solar because the cost of transmission lines in Australia divided per person is more expensive than rooftop solar. So like
but
literally
but that's right.
infinite, yeah, infinite clean energy would not be cheaper than rooftop solar because you'd still have to build the power lines to get it to people, and rooftop solar is cheaper than building all those power lines. So
Right. But the state that I can get compensated in to use my battery to help my neighbor is Texas. The state
yeah,
that I can't be compensated in, California,
yeah, they
Maryland,
just
New
found them full
York,
power plant.
Massachusetts, Illinois, right? All of these blue states, right? They ban you from helping your neighbor, right? You're not
We've got
allowed
to do
to,
better on that.
right?
Yeah, we've
And
got to do
so
better.
so part of what I want everyone to recognize in this moment is that climate is not blue and red. Climate is a set of technologies that we have busted our ass to get to a cost effective point on. And now we have to work just as hard to get this preferred solution to be the solution that everyone uses to meet this particular crisis, right? Our rates don't have to go up by 10% a year. Our rates can easily go down, right? But it only goes down if we all collectively work together to make good decisions. And right now, that's not happening. Not here in the United States, but not globally. And so, like, globally, we have to make better decisions in each and every place to make sure that the as you suggested, the most affordable solution is what gets deployed. And right now, we're deploying the most comfortable solution. The thing that like our grandfather taught us to do, which I love my grandfather. But like he had a different set of technologies that he was working on, right, than we have available to us today. We have to get with the modern age and figure out how to use these new technologies to really make bills affordable for people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We are on the cusp of an unbelievable solution space in terms of energy. Like we are there's that classic line like we've pretty much depended entirely on hydrogen and hydrocarbons for our energy, and now we're exploring the rest of the periodic table. Like all
That's right.
there's so much that we're just beginning to explore. So and what you said about the politics is really great too. There have been several Republican governors who have often sort of tried to promote clean energy in their states, like Brian Kemp of Georgia has been a big promoter of the Hyundai plants, and globally, many very, very conservative or authoritarian regimes, from Hungary all the way to absolute monarchy in Saudi Arabia, are overseeing big clean energy build-outs. This is just the smart kind of energy. It shouldn't have a political valence. It's just a really good idea to be building modern forms of energy. It's just become very politicized by the current White House. And um, so so yeah, we have a question here that's good because I think we just mentioned this and sort of glossed over it in ways that we're familiar with. But someone just asked, what are the technical political obstacles to using and sharing solar? The short answer is it's not legal to do that. Like in many jurisdictions, it's not legal to put a solar panel on your roof without a permit, and sometimes a permit takes months, and that is often enough by itself to kill someone's idea of getting rooftop solar. Do you have anything to add to that to respond to that Polson's
Well, I
question,
think
Jiggle?
it's
Yeah.
important to remember that rooftop solar doesn't actually lower your neighbor's bill. It lowers your bill, which is great, right? And if you have net metering, then you get full credit for it, et cetera. What lowers your neighbor's bill is batteries, right? And 15% of US households now have backup power of some sort, mostly gasoline or, like natural gas generators. But, increasingly people are opting for batteries, right? But the only way to get paid to help your neighbor reduce their bill is for the utility to use your battery as a grid resource, right? So remember, our distribution grid is one directional. It does not like power to go back up the distribution grid, up the substation into the transmission lines. They do not like that. They're not built for that. And so the way that your distribution grid works is during that 100 hours, 200 hours a year, right? There's 8,760 hours in a year where your distribution grid is hitting its peak. You want your battery to be deployed. And the safest way for it to be deployed is just to take your home off grid, right? Not to dispatch power back into the grid, but just to take your home off grid. So at a time of peak demand, your home is now like reducing its load, right? That's very safe. And when that occurs, then, suddenly like there's plenty of capacity left for your neighbors and they don't have to spend $100 million to upgrade that distribution substation and the rest of the distribution lines, right? And so that approach is something that we've been able to do for 15 years and Australia has been doing it for a long time, right? But it's not something that we can do in most blue states. And so, like, where can you do it? Rocky Mountain Power in Utah does it for everybody that lives in Utah, right? The Holy Cross Rural Electric Co-op lets you do it in Colorado, right? But for the vast majority of utility territories, if you put a battery in because you want backup power for your family, you work from home, whatever it is, you are not really allowed to get paid to help the grid in the time of need, right? And so that's the part we need to focus on is the battery, because batteries are capacity, right? What solar is a much cheaper way of filling up that battery, right? And so in Maryland here, I pay 19 cents a kilowatt hour for power. My solar system costs less than 7 cents a kilowatt hour to produce power. And so that is a much cheaper way of filling up my battery than using the grid to fill up my battery, right? And so for some people, they might actually just get a battery. For a lot of people, they get a battery and then they use their solar panels for fuel, right? But I think that it's important for us to recognize what's good for us as a household, right? The individual benefit, and what's good for our neighbors, which is the, communal benefit, right? And I think that right now in this moment, figuring out how to bring down the bills for our neighbors, I think is the big challenge in front of us. And for those of us who want to be helpful, which is, something on the order of 20% of all households in the United States, want to be helpful in this moment. They're motivated by climate, they're motivated by reducing bills. If they choose to participate in this way, you solve the entire problem of electricity load growth in our country.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the term covers everything of what you're talking about, but this is strongly overlapping with virtual power plants, right? Of which
Yeah,
this
of
is
course.
virtual power plants essentially. This is like the ability to decentralize power like that, to use software to have a bunch of home batteries filled up by solar acting in union as a power plant could solve a vast amount of our electricity problems. And that,
That's
yeah,
and that is one version for how you can be helpful to your neighbor, right? Is the battery, right, enrolled in a virtual power plant so that when the utility sends a signal, the battery automatically reacts to the signal and you get paid for that, right? The other devices that can be opted into a virtual power plant or your water heater, if it's an electric water heater, many new water heaters now come with an app on your phone, so it makes it super easy to enroll in a virtual power plant. Thermostats for a long time have been able to do this, right? Whether it's Nest or Ecobee or some of those other technologies can be enrolled in a virtual power plant. And EV chargers, right? So to the extent that you have an electric vehicle and you have an EV charger at home, what you find is that out of a 24-hour day, 4 hours are when your distribution grid is at peak. And so if the utility has the ability to make sure that you don't charge during those 4 hours, and if you really want to charge, you hit a red button and it sort of charges because you really need to charge, then like you can do that, right? And so these are all modest things that as we electrify everything, right? Because remember, the initial part of this question is if we want to decarbonize our energy system, we have to electrify everything, right? And as we electrify everything, if we want to have lower prices for everybody, then we have to get the transmission distribution grid that we've already paid for to be better utilized. Right now, it's atrocious, right? When you think about its utilization rate, it's very low. So we keep paying more and more for distribution. 44% of all of the expenses of the utility grid in the United States is distribution. And then another 25% is transmission, and then very little of it's generation, right? And that's why generation costs have actually gone down from an inflation adjusted rate since we passed all those renewable portfolio standards in the early 2000s. Um, and so don't let people tell you that solar and wind is why your rates are going up. It's because we keep investing in more distribution and transmission because we keep doing things the way our grandparents taught us how to do it.
absolutely. And what Jigo just said is to go back to an older question, that is how load growth can help reduce prices because it's not just load growth, because a bunch of little electric devices, EVs and home batteries with home fuel sources in the form of solar panels can act as a power plant that is feeding energy to their neighbors back to the grid.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's exactly it. And we actually have several actions on our Substack and our app, Daily Doses, focusing exactly on virtual power plants. There was a that we have several um sort of actions that can work either on our app as a sort of click through or as a web form if people don't want to download the app to try to get blue state leaders and all state leaders to pass model virtual power plant and virtual power plant rules. There's actually a model legislation that was come up with last year by Sunrun, Sonova, and some others. I'm sure you were either
oh, of
involved
course.
in all of that. And we created it. We've actually created an action. We think we should re-up it soon. Probably it might be out of date. To try to get people to do that. So you're basically saying yeah, Liz just put that there. I'm thinking I'm not sure if it's still live, that action, because we set it up a while ago and it might have expired. But yeah, it looks like that campaign's no longer active, but that means it's time to create a new one. So
That's
so
right.
you are absolutely going to continue advocating for virtual power plants as you recommend.
Yeah, I think where we are right now is that, these issues are so esoteric that they have been on page 30 of the newspaper for a very long time. And, because it's become such a crisis, it is now on page one, right? When you
Yeah.
talk to both the Democratic and the Republican Party in New Jersey and in Virginia, Energy is one of the top issues that consumers are talking about and asking their officials about for the gubernatorial election this year, right? That's coming this fall. So both all the governors, that are running for governor here are, being asked questions on electricity, and they don't have a good answer. When you ask them and say, like, what are the top four things that you would do to reduce electricity rates, they don't have an answer. So I think one of the things we have to do is to feed them these answers so they actually say it out loud, right? They don't know, right? And the thing is that, look, I love a good utility scale solar and wind farm, right? I do. But that basically, as you suggested with Saul Griffith, like, is not the solution to better utilization of transmission and distribution,
It's a
right?
solution to lots of other things, like
It's a
insulation from
solution to lots of other things. And
oil,
so
but like just building the power lines to run from a utility scale anything to a home is
that's
expensive. So
exactly right.
yeah,
And so I don't think anyone should go out and become anti-solar and anti-wind on the utility scale side. We need those things too. But I think what we need to be pro is demand flexibility, right? And grid enhancing technologies. We need to recognize that there's a short list of technologies. I'll give you some examples. So if you have an older home that has a 100 amp service and you decide to put an EV in, and your utility says we need to upgrade you to 200 amp service to be able to handle your EV, they upgrade that pole transformer in front of your house, which is $12,000, right? Now, if you get a smart panel, a smart breaker panel from like Span.io or Schneider Electric or some of these other companies, that costs $3,000, right? But the utility keeps putting a $12,000 upgrade in instead of the $3,000 upgrade. And that $3,000 upgrade actually can be enrolled into a virtual power plant because a lot of those smart panels can actually be enrolled into a virtual power plant, right? And so that could pay you more dividends later. But the utility is like, every time this happens, I always just upgrade the pole transformer. Why are you trying to get me to learn new things? I get it. Like, change is hard, right? But you can't just keep raising people's rates 10% a year, right? Like,
yeah.
it's just not possible. You just can't keep doing dumb things.
And we do have that sort of debatable natural monopoly situation where where people cannot just switch to another utility, where they are not subject to the normal market
That's right.
forces to a business that doesn't learn new things, getting out competed.
That's
So
right.
and another example of this is we've done a bunch of work and a bunch of events, and we're planning something for Sunday with a group called Bright
I
Sable. That's trying
love I love Sunday.
yeah, I love Sunday. I love Sunday too. I'm super excited when we're doing an event just like this. Um, and one of the people we're talking with is this group called Bright Sable, really great social oriented business that's trying to bring balcony solar to the US. And what they found is there's millions of people just using that in Germany, solar for rentals, solar that you can
Yes.
use if you don't have a roof. But in the US, often it's regulated like it's a utility scale power plant, and you have to do like months and months and submit technical drawings, and it's just a ridiculous amount of
And the
and
state that's made it fully legal is
Utah, led by a
Utah,
legislator.
right?
Yeah,
And you have a bunch of right-wing influencers promoting it because they think it's awesome, right? And so part
there
of my
are
challenge, what's that?
there are options here. There's options to make progress. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so part of my challenge right now is that we need to feed good ideas into our political leaders and we need to make blue states functional, right? Like we should have the lowest electricity rates in the country because we're doing the deployment of all these climate solutions at scale, right? But today, like what's happening, right? New York State just got rid of all of its solar incentives, right? And they did not make it easier to do business in the state of New York. So it's still double the cost of installing solar in New York than it is in Texas, right? Why? We need to make it cheap to do business in New York, right? And so part of the thing that I'm trying to wrestle with right now is that I know that everybody wants to hate President Trump. I get it. Like, like he does a lot of things that people find objectionable. But right now, where people have their largest sphere of influence, is particularly on Sunday, right? Coming up this Sunday, is in your local sphere of influence. Your school board, your city council, your mayor, your county commission. These are all people standing in the way of streamlining the cost of deploying these solutions. And they don't mean to. I don't think they're bad people. They just haven't gotten to it. Right. And
And
so
I don't know. Like so many people's idea of this is stuck in 2005 where renewables are expensive. And people don't know that this is going to be cheaper and can lower electricity prices.
I
Sorry,
think
I'll have to.
that's exactly right. And I think that when you think about just more basic things that people can do, the vast majority of electric of police cars, right, in the country, have to idle all day, right? Just it's part of the way that they operate those police cars. So most police cars get 3 to 4 miles per gallon, right, when they run them because of that. Because of that, electric vehicles are a 2-year payback. So everyone's police cars should be shifted over to electric vehicles. But you know who've done it at scale? Indiana, right? But not most other places, right? And that's because they were waiting for, union made cars because they didn't want to use Teslas. Fine. But now there's tons of union made cars that are actually available that could be police cars, right? And so there's no excuse. The other thing I would say is like volunteer firefighters. The vast majority of the firefighters in this country are volunteer firefighters. Only like 40% of our firefighters are actually paid, to be part of a firefighting force. And most of those people have to bring their own trucks to, their volunteer firefighter job and they get reimbursed for mileage and all these other things. But you know what the best truck is to actually like save people with the jaws of life? An electric vehicle. Why? Because you can plug the jaws of life directly into a Rivian or an F-150 Lightning and actually save someone's life, right? Like, and so like where are the programs to like help volunteer firefighters get into these electric trucks so they can do their jobs better? Like, I just think that we have to humanize our technologies. They are more than cost effective as we started this conversation, right? But now we have to like use those technologies to solve real world problems that people are facing in our community.
Yeah, this can sound very hot, very impenetrable, very technocratic, but it is fundamentally really cool stuff that the government is keeping from you. Like we should be able to push this in a very sort of appeals to both the left and right sides of the spectrum because you can portray it in a very left-wing way, like fossil fuel corporations have done regulatory capture and are stopping their competitors, or you can portray it in a very right-wing way, and both would be kind of true in this case, which is corrupt politicians are stopping you from powering your own home from your own roof. Like someone else, like another recent interviewee said, people should be we should sort of encourage people to see this as a right, something that empowers freedom because it does. That is something that you should be free to do. And
Well, for sure.
yeah, and we have one question that really touches on a lot of what you're saying, and also is obviously at the center of the one of the big debates in the Democratic Party right now because it's pretty much the topic of the abundance book. Someone asked, "Well, what can we learn from Texas to make it easier to deploy solar?" And I think one sort of somewhat controversial answer would be deregulation. Deregulation is often a bad word for the left, but strategic deregulation, making it easier to do business, making it easier to do stuff without a 6 month permitting process is definitely something that blue states really need to be doing.
Yeah,
So
look, I mean, I think that the broad platitudes on the abundance agenda, don't necessarily like resonate with everybody. And so I totally get that. But like in Boulder, Colorado, there is one guy who's in charge of approving every single permit. And he makes it his like mission in life to like read every application, visit your house twice before he approves the deal, right? Why? Right? We're talking about balcony solar right now, which what balcony solar is for people who don't know is you go to Home Depot, you buy a solar in a box, you unplug it, you stick it on your balcony, you just prop it up basically on the south part of your house and you plug it into the outside wall socket. That's all it is. You don't need an electrician, you don't need an installer, you don't need anything, right? When the guy in Boulder is making it his mission in life to read an application that has already been deployed 5 million times in the United States and to like visit your house twice, right? Like you can make an abundance claim here, right?
yeah,
Like that should just be a standard AI bot that you put in there and says, was this done properly? How does it compare to the other 5 million applications that were approved earlier? Oh, it's the same thing. Great. It is approved, right? And we reserve the right to inspect it later and make changes to your system if it was installed incorrectly, right? But like, we don't do that, right? They do that in Texas, by the way, but they
yeah,
don't do that in Boulder, Colorado, right? And so part of my challenge in this moment is that we all need to readjust our priors and stop going to our neighbors and our elected officials and saying, I know you've got love in your heart, so I'm going to give you a bunch of forgiveness for the fact that you're doing things in the dumbest way possible, right? We have a climate crisis right now. You can't keep doing things in the dumbest way possible. It's not allowed, right? You have to figure out what the best practices are, and you have to lead and put this stuff in place right now, right? Like that's it. That's how this goes.
Yeah, and that one guy in Boulder, Colorado, there was also a ProPublica story recently. There's one woman in Oregon, a random, like, retired lady, who
Yeah.
has by herself successfully sued to stop a large number of major, much-needed clean energy projects, like solar farms, wind farms, transmission lines, kind of just because she feels like it, kind of as a hobby. I mean, me, I'm sure she has some rationale, but Oregon, because it's a blue state that did out of a certain tradition of liberalism, wanted to very much improve public input for every process, passed state permitting laws that basically allow anyone to sue to block anything. And many blue states have done
No, I
something
read
similar.
that article. No,
Yeah,
it's true. And look,
yeah,
it's just something that we all need to figure out. Like, I get why a lot of those things were passed is because people use them to kill natural gas pipelines or other things
yeah,
in the past. But now all of those laws are being used to kill clean energy, right? And so you're just in a weird spot, right? And I think the
yeah.
CEQA laws were the same in California, where you were allowed to sue people. And then what the environmental groups were doing is they were saying, we're going to sue every project and we're going to make them donate to our conservation fund for us to drop the lawsuit. And the unions were using it to sue every project until people signed a project labor agreement. And so, I mean, I get why people were doing it, but it leads us to a more expensive future. And right now, affordability is something that we all need to like be striving for. And so a lot of what we did at the loan programs office was I never added any of these requirements, whether it's community benefits plans or project labor agreements or whatever else. What I instead mandated was that people actually genuinely have a good conversation, and I attended those good conversations. And so without mandates, I just made people have good conversations. And magically, pretty much the companies were willing to do 90% of what the local community asked for, right? And so all the projects got better, all the labor folks were happy, all the environmental groups were happy, et cetera, and we get it all done in 7 months, not in 7 years. So I think there is a way to make sure that people feel heard, right? We don't want to replicate the abuses of the 1940s and 50s when people just put stuff into poor neighborhoods because they could. So we want to make sure that we're learning from our mistakes of the past, but we also want to make sure that we're not allowing people to use lawsuits to delay important projects that we need to solve the climate crisis.
Exactly, because that permitting by lawsuit system, that thing where pretty much there are already many protections in place from the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act that prevent grave environmental damages. Many of the great wave of environmental laws from the 60s and 70s were doing their job, but a specific subset, the permitting ones, have become a place where anyone can sue to block anything. And several state permitting laws, like you said, SECA, have gone even further. And that is, to a large extent, why the US isn't building as much clean energy capacity as China and why blue states aren't building as much clean energy capacity as red
And
states.
this is why I think we need to just lead with a lot more love, like in our hearts here. Like, there's a group of people who hate me, in Indiana just because they hate clean energy. And I just reached out to them one day and I said, hey, how about we have a conversation about it? And it turns out there was a wind developer who really abused the system there in their county. And they all hate that wind developer. And as a result, they hate wind and solar. And after talking to me for 45 minutes and answering all their questions, they said, you know what, you're a really reasonable guy. Like, I appreciate you spending time. And now we're more pro wind and solar, right? And I just think that in general, like, instead of villainizing all of these people who, have become caricatures on Twitter or some other social media group, I think folks just have to engage with their local community and sort of say, look, I get the fact that you have been told by your dear leader that you're supposed to hate wind and solar, but like, let's have a conversation about it because, who else is offering farmers who are making $78 an acre right now because of these ridiculous ag policies for farming their land? They're being offered $300, $400, $500 an acre for not having to put fertilizer on the land, not having to put other things on the land for 20 years, right? For most of these farmers, what they want is to keep that land in their community and in their ownership, in their family's ownership for the next few generations, right? It was passed down to them. They want to be able to pass it down to the next group. And farming it for $78 an acre doesn't cut it, right? It doesn't cover the costs of a new tractor or a combine or whatever it is, right? And so solar and wind does that, right? And I just think that we have to engage with people, and engaging with people on webinars and engaging with people on social media, like, I think sounded great and felt great. but we have to engage with people at community centers, at city council meetings, at places where they live, and really win them over.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And that's kind of the whole idea for Sunday, this Sunday, right? Like
That's
in New
right.
Hampshire, there's someone running a Mallet Brothers like live concert with the soundstage entirely powered by an F-150 Lightning's battery, stuff like that. Like people are wanting to do parades, showcases, show off this cool technology and the cool stuff it can do.
That's exactly right. I just think that we have gotten into a place where we're very polarized and it's acceptable to hate other people. And like the way I was brought up is you're not allowed to hate other people. Like that's just not where this is, right? Like, some people have strayed and you got to engage and you got to figure out how to engage people in a productive way. And sometimes that gets frustrating, but we're all humans, like, hurling through space, like trying to figure out all these things, right? And I just think that we have like decided to be polarized. And like right now in this moment, what we really need to do is to explain to people that they're hurting because their policies, their energy policies are leading to double digit rate increases. And we have solutions to actually limit those rate increases to the rate of inflation or even lower, right? And so we just need to deploy those solutions at scale. And that's it, right? They don't have any better ideas. We have great ideas. So let's just like keep working with those great ideas. But remember, our, politicians in general that support climate action don't have a lot of these solutions at the tip of their tongue, and they need them.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now that the sort of that's a spectacular point. Someone just said in the chat, this is such a wise point from Jiggle, and it absolutely is. Like people don't know this stuff. I think very few people even know that like solar power has been the cheapest electricity in the his source in the history of humanity since 2020. Like the entire while the world was distracted by the COVID pandemic and an attempted coup in the United States, renewable energy became the cheapest source of electricity in the world, and it has been ever since. And it's been the big majority of everything new getting built ever since. And most people who voted for the current president probably have no idea that's the case and think it's an expensive sort of luxury.
And
And
electric vehicles are the cheapest way to you know
yeah,
to drive yourself around. I mean, when you think
yeah,
about how many people, right? There's about 5 to 8% of American households who drive 30,000 miles a year, right? Because for their work, for other things, etc. You can now get a Tesla Model 3. I get people don't like Teslas, but you can get a Tesla Model 3 used right now for $14,000, right? And it's still going to go another 2 or 300,000 miles. That's the cheapest possible way to, be a salesperson, be a person that actually like has to be on the road. Like it might not be your career, but it's other people's career, right? That's where we are today. But those people continue to buy internal combustion engine cars because they thought that they had to. And it's way cheaper to buy these other things and it improves air quality, right? And a lot of their kids have, asthma or other things that are going on, right? And so I just think we're in this place where we have these extraordinary technologies right now. And whether you're a volunteer firefighter, whether you're a police officer, whether you're somebody who has to drive 30,000 miles a year, like there's a lot of people who can benefit from all of this innovation that we've been funding for the past 40 years.
yeah, absolutely. And I know touching on another thing, like we're super focusing on like the cost and the cost of electricity because that is a big issue and it's being made worse by the current White House. But also, there's all the traditional reasons to go for renewable energy still apply too. Cleaner air, like not having huge oozing heaps of coal ash, like full of toxic heavy metals. Like I had childhood asthma, like you touched on, and it sucked. It's really a bad experience to have childhood asthma. I had it so severe that the doctors thought for a while I had cystic fibrosis. Fortunately, it turned out to not be that, but it really, really sucked. I'm very lucky to have almost entirely grown out of that. And and this is just a massive, massive world historic civilizational win-win that we have, in a sense, the privilege to be able to make happen a little faster in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so inspiring globally too. Like we've obviously talked a lot about the United States, but when you think about what's happened in Pakistan in the last 4 years, where I mean, they were really just completely screwed over by the partnership between Pakistan and China, which built 46 gigawatts of coal plants in 4 years in Pakistan, and then those plants didn't work. And so as a result, people were in rolling blackouts and people finally got so frustrated, they just started buying solar plus battery storage from their local bodega. And all of the wealthy families in Pakistan saw that people were buying it. So they started importing a bunch more from China and then started using trade finance, integrating power electronics into the panels, and then created YouTube videos and WhatsApp groups to help support each other to do it. And now, like 70% of all rural Pakistanis who didn't have electricity before now are solar and battery storage, right? And so when you think about what that means, we have 700 people, 700 million people in the world today who are in extreme electricity poverty, right? They barely have a solar lantern, right? All of those people are going to be fully electrified by 2035 because of solar and battery storage when fossil fuels have failed them for 60 years, right? It is an extraordinary story of human flourishing.
It is. It is. Fundamentally, we are at the dawn of an incredible renaissance, an incredible ascension, really. Like the recent Emble report on the electrotech revolution said, like, this might be the biggest deal since the Industrial Revolution. Like,
It most
future
certainly is.
they periodize human history as foragers, farmers, fossil fuels, photovoltaics. And we've been living in the fossil fuel age from the 1700s through the 2020s, and now we're entering the photovoltaic age. And there was just an unbelievable wealth of possible photovoltaics and, of course, batteries and all the other associated technologies. And that is really brings incredible possibilities.
I think that's exactly right. And so I just think that, and even on electric vehicles, I mean, when you think about just how many countries in South America are moving to all electric transit buses, all electric, vehicles, et cetera, like it really just is happening at a scale that's just breathtaking, right? And
Yeah.
so now, like one other example I'll give you is like Ethiopia has banned the importation of internal combustion engine vehicles, right?
You don't
Why?
need them. Like much of
Because
Africa is
they
building electric mopeds and stuff. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, but more than that, they have to then separately import gasoline and diesel. But you know what they have a lot of? Electricity. They have a big dam, they've got like a bunch of solar power plants, et cetera. And so they've got homegrown fuel. So they'd rather bring in cars they can use their homegrown fuel. And so you're starting to see a lot of countries who don't manufacture vehicles, who don't have a refinery, right? Which is most countries, starting to say, this is just good for our balance of payments from our Treasury Department, and our Federal Reserve is saying this is better for us to just bring in electric vehicles than to have to deal with the geopolitics of oil.
And this is something that, in a way, Americans are not totally missing out on, but relatively missing out on, because it is now easier to get rooftop solar in Pakistan than Pennsylvania. And a big part of the reason for that is Pakistan doesn't have a very big entrenched domestic fossil fuels industry that spent billions of dollars on the last election. They don't have these permitting issues, the huge array of barriers that could prevent someone from getting this.
Well, we also over-engineer all of our stuff. I mean, just to put this in perspective, you talked about Saudi Arabia building battery storage. The
Yeah.
cost of Saudi Arabian battery storage, which is the same stuff that we import from China, is around $90 per kilowatt hour. The cost of that same battery in the United States is $240 a kilowatt hour, right? Because of the tariffs that we charge, because of all the other stuff, right? And so, part of this is actually just us getting smarter about what's driving a lot of these costs and like how we actually achieve this much lower cost, deployment of these technologies. And I just think we have to just drive that home. That should be our North Star, as we have got to reduce the soft costs of
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
deploying all these technologies.
Legalize the amazing new energy source that legalize or deregulate whatever term you want to use. Let people have it. Let people have it without, like you said, in 7 months instead of 7 years for a grid scale thing, in 7 days instead of 7 months for a home scale thing. We gotta make this happen faster.
That's exactly right. One last thing, I saw a question in the chat that I want to make sure we cover is that, for those people who are continuing to take care of their internal combustion engine car and drive it all the way into the ground, please do that. Like the material benefits of keeping your existing car and actually driving it until it really breaks down is good, right? I also hate the fact that JP Morgan tore down 270 Park, and that was a perfectly great building, the old Union Carbide building, just to build their own new net zero building. No, right? Like leave the old building in place. There's no reason to use all that new steel and all that new concrete and all that new stuff. Like we should be getting more out of the stuff we use. One of the things that bothers me the most about Energy Star appliances is some of the new Energy Star appliances, particularly from Samsung, but other technologies, like they break like in 4 years and then it costs you $850 to fix it. Stop it. Like just
Yeah.
give me like a pretty energy efficient unit that lasts for 20 years like an old Kenmore, right? Like
It's
what are we doing? Like,
yeah,
it's overall costs, right?
yeah, and this is also it's sort of different right now, but there really is a huge amount of conceptual overlap between sort of the clean energy and the right to repair movement in terms of just bringing kind of self-actualizing your own relationship to technology, like letting yourself get your own home, repair your own stuff, build your own energy supply, stuff like that.
That's exactly right. I think we can do both. And I just feel like people, and Saul Griffith talks about this beautifully, right? Which
Yeah.
is what we're talking about is when people are required to do something new, it's at that moment we should intervene and actually make sure that they get the best thing that gets them the best deal.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and we can do that right now. And like you said, the fight right now in a time of federal sort of chaos is at the state and local level.
That's
I'm
right.
going to jump in here, guys. I could go on listening to you guys for hours. And in fact, I've probably listened to Jigger for hundreds of hours.
Thank you.
I do my walk listening in the old days to Energy Gang, which was his podcast, with a couple other brilliant co-stars and co-hosts. And then, when Biden came along, that was really brilliant, Jigger, that he picked you for that position. I mean, that just blew me away.
I was honored, especially for all of the crap I said on the Energy Gang. I thought that for sure that would be disqualifying, but I guess he wanted somebody bold.
It was not crap. It made my day. You opened your mouth. I was going, goody, goody. Jigger's going to say something. And then that, of course, that ended. And now you guys are back with Open Circuit. And I'm saying this by way of also giving a plug to you and
Thank you.
your pod. It's called Open Circuit. And this is my go-to pod for just wanting to be up on what's happening on the energy front lines. And you can imagine, Jigger here in approving so many loans, he's talked to people up and down throughout the economy, owners of battery factories, scientists and so on. So it's a great, if you listen to no other podcast on the energy transition, it should be Open Circuit. I also want to make a plug for us. And I just want to say just my personal reaction listening to you, Jigger, and really shining a spotlight on how blue politicians, we climate activists, we're constantly complaining about the red politicians, right? They're saying, oh, right. But what about our politicians? I'm in Oregon now, right? This is so exciting that though the people that we have the most influence with are the people we most need to do something now,
There's
right?
people who
That's
actually
it.
listen to us that we have important stuff to tell. Yeah.
We could go around being depressed by Trump and all the knuckleheaded things he's doing, but hey, we've got our own agenda here. Let's get the state of Oregon and our city council people on board, and let's remove these obstacles. There's an education component to it, and then there's also an advocacy component for it. And if you have a second, I just want to ask you a question of especially interest to this whole audience, Jigger. What is the role for citizen advocacy in this day and time? Is it anything other than what I just said, or what would you say?
It's to show up, right? Look, I think we have to recognize that our city council members and our mayors and our county commissioners were not elected for their expertise in electricity. They were not elected because they're experts in electric vehicles. They got elected for lots of other reasons, right? And so, we need to show up. We need to be in the back of the room, knitting a sweater for our, niece or nephew, and figuring out how to be helpful in this moment to these folks because right now they feel completely lost. Like when I talk to all these folks, they're just like, Jigger, just tell me what to do, right? I don't know the answer. I just know electricity bills are going up and people are pissed off at me. And, our Public Service Commission doesn't know what to do. But, when you talk to the Public Service Commission, they don't have permission to run the grid differently, right? They don't, right? So if you say to them, why aren't you letting, us get paid properly for the battery in my house? They don't think the governor that appointed them actually gave them permission to say, let's completely change the way the distribution grids are run, right? So that conversation has to be outside of that public service commission, and they need to be given permission to make that wholesale change, right? They don't believe that they're fully empowered to do that on their own, right? Even though they are. And so I think part of this is just being human here and recognizing that these people who, are public servants in the Public Service Commission. I mean, that is a thankless job if there ever is one. They're doing cable and they're doing telephone and they're doing natural gas and everything else. And everyone just yells at them all day, right? Because it's always their fault, right? I mean, they don't know that they actually have permission to deploy technology at scale, right? They're not supposed to be running the utility company. They're supposed to be, a judicial body basically that approves their rate cases. And so us advocates have to be loud around them and give them permission to do the right thing.
Great. Well, that's a good showing up is a good segue to our final announcement. As Sam mentioned earlier, we are doing a Sunday action party. When? Well, this Sunday, of course. Bill McKibben will be there in absentia. I guess he did a nice little video for the Climate Action Now community. So we'll top that off. Liz, I think, has put the Eventbrite registration for folks. And really, we strategize this with Third Act. Third Act is really focused on Sunday in-person events around the country. But for people who don't have an in-person event that you can get to, or for whatever reason you can't, we schedule this for after all of those in-person events so that you can participate virtually. And you'll hear from people at Third Act. And Sam will be moderating that. And Sam will be giving at the top of the hour an overview. We're calling this, Liz, I think globally, act locally is the name for this. And Sam will be giving an overview at the top of the hour with a lot of information about things that Jigar has worked on and great data from Ember, which is another fantastic data resource. So I hope you all will be there with us. That'll be this coming Sunday at 4 p.m. And one final announcement. Most of you have used the Climate Action Now app. Well, that's great. With the app, our can-doers have sent over 3,800,000 messages to elected officials. We've planted over 400,000 trees. But guess what? It's an app. We are in the phases now of rolling out a web version of Climate Action Now. And any organization, a church group, a Rotary Club, an advocacy group, we can give you 2 lines of HTML, put it on your web page, and boom, you'll have the action carousel where you can be advocating for the kinds of things that Jigar has been talking about today. It's super easy. We're making it available for free. Our first user is probably going to be the Greenfield, Michigan Presbyterian Church, although they are competing with another church in New York to get there first. So anyway, that's what's in the future. You guys are all fantastic. I told you this would be great. Was I right? This was worth joining. We love you, Jigar. Thank you so much for all the great work you do.
Of course. And there's a 30-minute video that Sunday released yesterday, which is amazing. I just put a link to my LinkedIn piece in the chat on that. So feel free to send that around to people. It's got a lot of these talking points that we covered, a lot of the optimism in that video.
Yeah, and Liz, let's put a link to that video in the follow-up email to everybody who registered for this event, because a lot of people who register don't come because they count on the recording. Sam, Liz, Jigar, especially, thank you all. Thank you everybody for coming. There's so much we can still do that is so important. Thank you all for coming. And then Jigar, if you could just hang with us for 2 minutes for a housekeeping thing with the Climate Action Now staff. But everybody else, thank you so much. And I'll see you this Sunday at Sunday Action Party. Thanks so much.
Thank you.